Hey babes, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maya and today's video is me rating all of the books that I read in 2022. I track all of the books that I read on Goodreads. I know that in the book community, Goodreads isn't like loved, but I really like Goodreads. I'll leave my Goodreads link below if you guys want to follow me or add me as a friend to see what I'm reading throughout the year. I used to be a really big reader when I was a kid, and then in 2019 I got back into reading and I read so many books, and then in 2020, and then as it's gone, I just read less and less books. But I actually think I read more books this year than I did in 2021, so good on that. I'm gonna put all of this year's reading stats at the end of the video for anybody that wants to see it, but I'll just get into the actual like rating of the books now. So the first book that I read in 2022 was In 5 Years by Rebecca Serle, and I rated it a 4 stars. I didn't leave a review, so I could barely remember this book, honestly, but from what I remember and from reading like the synopsis, so she has this 5-year plan. She ends up waking up one day and she is engaged, but the man that's next to her isn't the man that she's actually engaged to. And it is a story about friendship, about betrayal, about desire, about a lot of different things. About like, I think the overall concept is that life isn't gonna go the way that you think it is. This one was weird. It was weird. I feel like there were parts of it that I really loved. There was parts that were like really heart-wrenching for me because of like the relationship between the main character and her friend. But like the overall point of it was super weird, and I don't know if I would read it again if I would have the same views. So it was weird. It was a bit weird. I wouldn't recommend that one to anyone. The next book that I read was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstein, and I give it 5 stars. I love this book. Okay, how do I even describe what this book is about? So it's about this guy who research ends up reading this book. He's in the book, so his name, something that happens to him, is in the book, and so he goes on this quest to figure out why he's in this book. He ends up in this magical world, like all of these things happen. The book literally feels like a fever dream towards like the halfway mark. Goes to spaces that you wouldn't think it would go. So gay romance, so I love that. I just really love this book. I feel like the writing was so lyrical and beautiful. I am a sucker for lyrical writing. I just am. I don't know. And I'm not even super big on like descriptive writing. It's just like beautiful writing. So really love this book. Highly recommend. I definitely want to read it again. But it's a book that I can only read like once a year. And I have some more stuff that I want to pick up by Erin Morgenstein. So the third book was The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Bard. This book was not what I expected at all. I rated this book 4 stars. Had I realized what this book actually was, I wouldn't have read it. I know for a fact. It wasn't bad once I read it though. So the book is about this disease that kills all of the men, and it's like, or not all of the men, but like it's ravaging and it's killing most men, and what happens to society when that happens. And I thought it was gonna give this mockumentary about there being like no more men and women getting the ability to carry children on their own. Like funny but also informative and thought-provoking mockumentary. So I thought it would have like more like these comedic elements, and it did not have literally any comedic elements. It was very dark, very heavy. There were some like light moments in there, but it's really talking about what happens when a society loses half of its population. What is the world response? And because I lived through COVID, I just never ever want to read a pandemic book again. Like, I'm not interested in it. I never want to read or watch a story about some disease taking over. Like, I'm just like absolutely not into that. And so in the future, if I start reading a book and it becomes that, I'm going to not read it anymore. I'm just going to DNF it, which means like do not finish. I'm not going to finish it, because it was kind of hell going through that, and like COVID was traumatic enough. Okay, thank you. We're done. I read Verity by Colleen Hoover. I think this is the first book that I actually read by Colleen Hoover, and Verity was so weird. I gave it 4 stars. I'm giving all these books 4 stars. Oh my god, love that for me. Verity was super weird too. So it was about this writer who ends up getting the job of finishing the books of another writer because she becomes like comatose, husband, and the agency hires on another writer. But there becomes like this romance between the writer that's hired to finish the books and the husband of the original author. Even though the wife is still alive, it's a lot. It's a lot. She finds this manuscript of the original author's life that she's not supposed to find, and it's like very dark, and there's a lot in here. I would highly recommend checking out any trigger warnings before you read this book. But I really enjoyed the ride, even though it was super weird. The ending was really good. I have so many thoughts on it. I would definitely read it again. It was a page turner for sure. And it was Colleen Hoover, so you know, it was good. It was really good. It was a great introduction into Colleen Hoover, so yeah. Then I read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book I gave 2 stars. Okay, so I am like slightly remembering this. I think I romanticized the memory of this book, but in actuality, like, this book, like, nothing really happens. It's about this robot lives in a store and she's trying to get picked, and then she's like waiting on this girl to pick her. I don't really remember the storyline. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't particularly recommend it. The synopsis sounded like way more interesting to me than the actual book. There's really like not a lot going on in the plot. And I think you're supposed to like really get invested in the robot, and I could just only get so invested. So 2 stars. Okay, and then I read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, 5 stars. This is by Mitch Albom. It is so good. This is a book that I think everyone should read, and I think I'm gonna do a video on that, like the 5 books that I think everyone should read. So this book is about this man who works at like kind of like this like carnival, or like more like a Pierre kind of, I don't know, like rides and stuff. He's dying, and it's talking about like what happens in the people that he meets in heaven, and each of the people that he meets in heaven, they teach him something about the life that he lived, and they're all like very random people. So sometimes they're people that you know, sometimes they're people that are just like in like similar situations to you that you cross paths with. He meets with a variety of different people. They're not necessarily the people that you would exactly think they were going to be. It was so good. It was so good. I feel like this book taught me that humanity is a lot more connected than we realize that we are. It told me to be a lot more like appreciative of life, and like taking your life into your own hands and making the decision that you actually want to make, because you only have this one life. Also about like thinking of other people, this idea that like, no, you don't owe anybody anything. And while like to an extent I think that's true, you technically don't owe anybody anything, I think it would be nice to consider other people and their emotions and reactions of your personal actions. It was just amazing. I honestly think that it gave me a completely different perspective on life, on death, on mortality in general, and on humanity. And I highly recommend it. If you don't read anything else on this list, I would recommend you reading this book. And it's the shortest book that I read, so it's very easy to get through. Okay, the next book that I read was The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. Oh my god, I have been wanting to read this book for a while, but I just never picked it up. I gave this book 5 stars. This was an amazing book. I forgot I read this, but I remember the book like pretty much in detail. So The Grace Year is about this year called the Grace Year, that girls in this society have to go away for a year, and they go to like this place in the woods, and basically they have to like fend for themselves for a year, and the whole point is for them to like get their magic, like to lose their magic during that time, because there's this idea that women are like magical, and it's a very like patriarchal, misogynistic society. Young girls, I think they're 16. I don't know if they go their 16th year or their 17th year, but they're literally teenagers, and then there becomes this like beautiful romance that's like extremely unexpected. It's really about who pays the cost for the decisions of greedy men, and everything is not what it seems. That's the best way I would describe it. If that is interesting to you, pick this up. There are a lot of trigger warnings that you should have. There is a lot of graphic things that happen in this book. It's very heart-wrenching. I bawled. I sobbed. I don't know why I sobbed during this book. It was so good. It was just a lot. So look at the trigger warnings if you read it. Then the next book that I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry, which I gave it 4 stars, by the way. Okay, so basically Beach Read is about these 2 authors who are like arch nemesis, I guess, from college, and they end up in the same like small town, and they end up challenging each other to write each other's genre. And of course they're like falling in love along the way. But there's also like this side story about the main character and her father, because her father dies and she realized he was living this completely different life. And so you're like diving into that. So you're diving into like double lives, which I really like in romance novels. I have tried really hard to get into like the really like oh nothing is happening romances, and I think that that is like a great escape. I think those can be amazing books. I just don't think that I typically like them when I pick them up. There has to be like either a trope that I'm really interested in a romance, or there has to be like some other like storyline in my romance novels. I have tried really hard to get into like the really like oh nothing is happening romances, and I think that that is like a great escape. I think those can be amazing books. I just don't think that I typically like them when I pick them up. There has to be like either a trope that I'm really interested in a romance, or there has to be like some other like storyline or something else going on for me to actually enjoy it. So yeah. Book that I read was The Trials of Morgan Crow, which is a part of the Nevermore series. I love this. This is middle grade, okay? So this is like, if you're a Harry Potter stan, you would love The Trials of Morgan Crow. Oh my god, I don't know why I didn't tell Karen about this. I need to tell Karen. Nevermore is all about this girl who is a cursed child, which means that pretty much everything is always her fault in her town. Like, she gets blamed for literally everything, and she's a cursed child because of like the day that she was born. I can't remember what day. I think it's like her 11th birthday or something. Like on one of her birthdays, she's supposed to die, and she ends up getting whisked away, and she has to like compete to get a part of like this school in this different world. And it's so interesting. And I read all of the 3 books. 4 stars to the first book. I gave 5 stars to the second book, which is Wondersmith. 5 stars to the third book, which was Hollowpox. They were just so good. I read them back to back to back. I was obsessed with the characters. I love Morgan Crow. She's a fiery, fun girl. If you liked like Junie B. Jones, I don't know, any like fiery like character, you would like her. I feel like this is just a really cute series. There's one more book that I'm waiting on, and you better believe I'm gonna try to read all 3 books in preparation, because I've already forgotten a lot of details and I want to remember everything when it's time for the last book. Then the next book that I read was Slade House by David Mitchell. Oh my god, this was so weird. This was a 3 stars. I think I like some weird books. Like, I think it's time for me to admit it. I like weird books. So Slade House is about this house that someone gets invited into it every like X amount of years, and you're enjoying it and you're not going to want to leave, and then you're going to realize that you can't leave. Dun, dun, dun. I'm just going to leave it at that. It was very, very weird, and I'm going to leave it there. The next one that I read was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I gotta let horror go. I don't like horror. I'm never gonna like horror. I'm not into gothic horror. I'm not into it, you know? I've tried really, not that hard, but I've tried a few books and I'm just not into it. A Dowry of Blood, I gave it 3 stars. This one 3 stars though. So it wasn't terrible, it just wasn't like my cup of tea. Dowry of Blood is basically about like Dracula's creating like this harem of lovers over time. The story of like what happens to them, I guess that's the best way to put it. There's a lot that happens in the book. There's definitely a storyline going on, but you're getting it from the perspective from one of his brides. And it's just, it's not the vampire story that I've ever read. It's definitely like horror. Some parts of it that were like really like gruesome for me to read. If you're like a typical horror reader, this is like a walk in the park. I'm just not into horror. The next book was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. That was the second Emily Henry book that I read in 2022. And I really like this one. I gave this 4 stars. People We Meet on Vacation is about these 2 friends who went on vacation with each other, and then like something weird in the relationship happened, and then they decided to go on vacation together again. And it's about like talking about their relationships, discovering themselves. Like, there's just a lot going on. There's like a secondary plot in here that I just can't remember, but I remember thinking that like, this is a good book. I'm enjoying it. I'm invested in the characters, and I would recommend it. The next book that I read, we're gonna talk about both of them. So I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I read It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I rated them both 5 stars. Lots of trigger warnings for this book, like about domestic violence and a bunch of stuff, or like the series in general. So definitely look up the trigger warnings before you read this book. It Ends With Us is about this girl who ends up in this abusive relationship, her life and how she ended up there. And I feel like this was a really, really, really good book, because I feel like it actually captures what it's probably like to be like in a domestic violence situation, and like why it's so difficult for people to like leave the situation, and how complicated and how easy it is to get stuck in that situation. It's very, very good. I like it brings up so many good questions, and I felt like it was handled with a lot of like delicacy and love and compassion. And the author has like a very personal relationship with the book, because she's a survivor of domestic violence. I thought it was very well done. I'm like, it's a very popular book, so not surprising to anyone. I saw everybody reading this and I was like, okay, I gotta read it, and I loved it. I read Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. This one is about this girl. Something happens, and then she ends up realizing that her entire town is full of like witches, and she's also a witch, and she has no memory of it. And it's about like her learning why she doesn't have any memory of it, and learning like what her town really is. And I rated this book 3 stars because it was like, I had a good time and I thought the plot was really cute and fun. The main character is just simply insufferable. She's insufferable. She's so annoying. She basically is like this ultra like feminist, like, yeah, like I'm Hillary Clinton kind of girl, like who's always going on these like super like feminist rants, and it's just a lot. She's a lot for me. I don't know if she's like, is she supposed to be unlikable, but she's like super annoying. If you read any of the reviews, that's like probably the most common one, is that the main character is so annoying. But I still liked her relationships with other people, and I like the book overall. I don't know if I'd continue on in the series, probably not, but it wasn't a bad book. The next book that I read was Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I am a TJ Klune stan. I also read House in a Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So good. Under the Whispering Door was heavy. I cried like multiple times throughout this book. It's about this guy who's kind of like a not so great person, and he dies. He gets taken to this place. He rediscovers things about himself through this journey of death, and it's so beautiful. It's another book. I don't know, books about mortality are like, they're very dicey. I feel like I've read some really good ones that are like amazing, and I recommend them to everyone, and I think they change the way that I view the world. And then I read some other ones that are like done in like poor taste. They're really weird, so they're hit or miss. But I really like this book. I felt like it dealt with the trauma of death in a very specific way. Often we talk about like the grief of other people when you die, but we don't talk about the person that like actually dies, and the grief of them and their life, and the traumatic experience of death, and how the type of death that you have is like can also impact the way that you feel about your death. And it was just like very interesting. I really like the way that the author, I love the way TJ Klune wrote the book. I love the way that he explored these relationships with the characters. There's also a gay romance in there. There was also gay romance in the House in the Cerulean Sea, so I love it. And I love the way that he lets the romances unfold. They don't take over the books, but they're also like these like really beautiful additions to it that make you like want to root for the characters and love the characters even more. Really good. I can't say enough good things about this book. It's very good. And then I read In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. In a Holidays, it gave what needed to be gave. I gave it 5 stars. I would recommend reading this around Christmas time. I think I'm gonna read this around Christmas time every single year. It's about a Groundhog's Day kind of story where she's repeating the same day over and over again, or like scenario trip over and over again, and it's about like self-discovery and going for the things that you want, and not letting life pass you by. And it's just like this beautiful romance that blossoms, and I like love the characters, and I wish there was like a series out of this, but I know that their stories are over. Like the stories have ended, so I can't ask for a sequel or a trilogy or anything. But I loved it. I loved like more than just like the couple. I loved like the family that was surrounded. It was just beautiful. Also talked a lot about chosen family, and that's something that I really relate to because I don't have the best relationship with my family. And so I love like seeing people create their own families, and like how beautiful that is, and like actually creating like community with long-term friendships. And so it also like taught me, okay, I need to start getting some more friends because I want that type of community as I grow up, you know? So yeah, it taught me like that it is valuable and worth it to explore more connections and friendships with other people. The next book that I read by Christina Lauren was The Soulmate Equation, and this got 3 stars. I love this concept. I read another book with this concept and it just still didn't hit the same. So I think I like the concept. I just don't think I've ever read a book that executes it properly, but I believe it can be done. So The Soulmate Equation is basically about this company that creates this technology to look at your DNA to find your soulmate. Single mom who takes a test, and then lots of things happen. A lot to be desired for. I don't know, I just never was really rooting for the characters. I don't know, I just wasn't that into them. The love story was weird. I also feel like the guy character, like, how do you go from being such like an a-hole to like nice all of a sudden because you want her? It wasn't very desirable. It was like, it wasn't a bad book. I didn't not enjoy my time there. I enjoyed my time reading it. I just felt like I feel like Kristen Lauren's so hit or miss for me. Last book I read was a reread of The Power by Naomi Alderman. So this one I was classifying as my favorite book of all time, and I think that it's like in that realm. I gotta decide like what's my true favorite book of all time, because The Power is not a book that I would like just pick up and read out of nowhere again. I don't think, at least not for a while. It's a very thought-provoking book. So The Power is all about women getting the ability to kill by using their bodies, and they get like this like power, and what happens to society when women can like level out the playing field and they can like rebalance the power. How do societies respond and react to that? And I think because, you know, I'm a political scientist, my master's degree in political science, and political science is the study of power. So I'm really fascinated by understanding power dynamics and how power shifts and what societies and governments do based on who has power. So I found it really interesting. I feel like this book always leaves me kind of upset that like parts of it aren't true because of the way that it shifts the world. I love that it's told by so many different people and perspectives, but I definitely I'm not recommending the book to people. For lots, I just feel like this book is for a very specific person. It's like for someone that's really into like, you gotta be really into like kind of like politics and like power dynamics and stuff like that, I think, to just read it on your own. If you're really into feminist studies and gender studies, I think you would like this reading it on its own because of how thought-provoking it is. But I think it would be best read either in school as like a class discussion or through a book club, because I think what's like really interesting about the book is more than what's on the page. It's like the questions that they bring up. It's the themes. It's totally the themes. And so yeah, it was a reread. I still give it 5 stars. I definitely feel like it's a really hard book to read just sitting there on your own without like anybody to like engage in dialogue with. Really heart-wrenching, you know, like things that go on in this book. It's really difficult, you know, for you to read some of it, but I really liked it and I think it should be taught in schools. So those were all of the books that I read in 2022. I'm hoping that this year I will read 52 books. So my goal is to read 1 book a week. If I read more, that's cool. If I read less, that's cool. I really want to read at least 50 though. So that is my goal. And if you guys want to keep track, like I said, you guys can follow me on Goodreads. I'm also updating my Instagram stories with like my rating and the book that I read, and I'm going to make a highlight on my Instagram stories. You guys can check me out here and follow me and keep track of everything. Let's get into the stats. So I read 21 books this year for a total of 7,819 pages. And these are just like the nonfiction books that I read. I read a ton in grad school in 2022. I started grad school and I was reading over 1,000 pages every week for like the first couple of months. And then I was skimming, then I was skimming. So I probably read closer to like, including all the articles. Yeah, I probably read close to like maybe like 15 to 20,000. So do it that way you will. My shortest book that I read was 196 pages. It was The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. So good. And the longest book that I read was 560 pages, and it was one of the books in the series, The Trials of Morgan Crow. This one was Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morgan Crow. So I think this is like the 3rd book. Average book length in 2022 was 372 pages. The book that I read that was the most shelved by people was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which who was shocked by that? Literally no one. And the least shelved book is Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck, which I'm not surprised by. I had never heard anybody talking about it, but I really liked it and I'm really glad that I still read it. And my average rating for 2022 was 4.3 stars, which is such a big deal, like such a big deal for me, because in that year, 2019, where I read so many books, my average rating was so much lower. In 2021, my average rating was a 3.8, and I read 11 books. So I read even less books, and my rating was even lower. So I wasn't loving the things that I was reading. And in 2020, my average rating was even lower. It was a 3.6. So I read 38 books, and my rating was super low. And then in 2019, when I read the most amount of books, I read 41 books that year, and my average rating was a 3.5. And I was rating things a lot higher because it was when I was just getting back into reading. So the fact that this year we hit 4.3 is like, I'm happy. I'm like more than happy. Like, I'm ecstatic. And I will see y'all on the next video. Bye, babes.